Hello students. In today's video, first we are going to understand the concept of pharmacovigilance and then we will summarize the process of pharmacovigilance. Now this video is sixth in the series of videos on new drug discovery and development. Now pharmacovigilance is derived from the two words. Pharmakon is a Greek word which means any medicinal substance or a drug, while vigilia is a Latin word which means to keep watch or to monitor or to observe. So pharmacovigilance is the process of monitoring safety of drugs. Now as we all know, every drug is associated with a number of pharmacological effects on the body. Now these effects include therapeutic effect, that is the benefit of drug, and adverse effect, that is the risk of a drug. So pharmacovigilance is a process where risk-benefit ratio of drugs is monitored and subsequently action is taken to reduce risk and increase benefit of the drug. The World Health Organization, that is WHO, defines pharmacovigilance as the science and activities relating to the detection, assessment, understanding of adverse effects or any other drug related problems. So pharmacovigilance is a process where first adverse effect is detected. This is followed by the assessment of adverse effect, that is its validity is checked if the information on adverse effect is correct. Assessment is followed by understanding the seriousness of adverse effect, if it's fatal or if it's life-threatening. And finally, measures are taken to prevent the adverse effect. Thus, aim of pharmacovigilance is to improve patient safety and quality of life. Let's now summarize the process of pharmacovigilance. Now, pharmacovigilance process has 4 stages. First step is the detection of adverse effect. Second step is the assessment of adverse effect, where validity of adverse effect is checked and a compiled report on the adverse effect is prepared and submitted to the respective regulatory authority. Third step is understanding drug safety profile, where risk-benefit ratio of the drug is thoroughly reviewed, and the final step is the prevention of adverse effects. Now let's understand each of these steps one by one. Now as discussed, first step in the process of pharmacovigilance is the detection of adverse effects. Now this includes first identification of adverse effect and then reporting of the adverse effect. Now adverse effects are identified by the two sources. The first source is the solicited source and the second source is the unsolicited source. Now, solicited sources are the established channels that report adverse effects, and these include identification of adverse effects during conduction of phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials, then identification of adverse effect during phase 4 clinical trials, that is the post-marketing surveillance. Another solicited source is the registries. These also identify the adverse effects. Unsolicited sources are the healthcare professionals like doctors, nurses, pharmacists, etc. Then regulatory authorities, literature published in the journals, internet and media, and even legal cases filed against the drug. Now, identified adverse effects are reported to the approved pharmacovigilance centers, hospitals, academic institutions, etc. Now, after detection of adverse effect, the second step in pharmacovigilance process is the assessment of adverse effect. Now, this step is called as a triage. Now, here validity of adverse effect is assessed or determined. Now, a valid adverse effect report should have 4 elements: an identifiable patient, an identifiable reporter, suspected drug causing adverse effect, and an adverse effect. Now, presence of all these 4 elements verify occurrence of adverse effect. Now, if found valid, Occurrence of adverse effect is entered in safety database. Now this is followed by coding of adverse effect as per MEDRA. Now MEDRA is a medical dictionary for regulatory activities. Now adverse effect is coded in the regulatory language so that it could be understood globally. Now this is followed by causality assessment. Now when a patient takes a drug and experience an adverse effect, now the adverse effect could be because of the drug or the disease or some other cause. So causality assessment determines relationship between the drug and the adverse effect. Now causality assessment is a graded assessment. It's graded as, for example, definite. That is, yes, the cause of adverse effect is drug, or it can be probable or possible or doubtful. Now the most popular method used for causality assessment is by the use of standard algorithms and rating scales, like for example the Ranjo algorithm. Now, causality assessment is followed by the labeling assessment to determine if adverse effect is labeled, that is well documented, or unlabeled, that is not well documented. This is followed by the narrative writing, where brief summary is made and documented on the adverse effect. Additional information about the adverse effect, if required, is obtained during the query process. And finally, safety team review all the information on the adverse effect and provide expert medical inputs or reviews. Now the compiled adverse effect report along with the expert comments is submitted to the respective regulatory authority for further review. Now, once compiled adverse effect report along with the medical review is obtained, the third step in pharmacovigilance is to understand drug safety profile. Now, safety profile of the drug, that is benefit risk ratio of the drug, is reviewed by a number of documents. Now, one such document is the periodic benefit risk evaluation report, which was made during the process of phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. So this report is again thoroughly reviewed. Second is the signal analysis. So the signal analysis is done. That is huge data on adverse effect, that is safety database on the drug obtained from huge number of sources and the regions is again analyzed. Now, in addition to this, development safety update report, that is DSUR, collected during the development of drug are closely examined and reviewed. Another is the review of risk management plan. So, risk management plan made prior to the marketing of drug is again reviewed and analyzed. Now, this risk management plan describes a plan to promote safe use of drug, identify adverse effect, and a process to minimize and prevent the adverse effect. So, all these documents are thoroughly reviewed so that measures could be taken to prevent the adverse effect. Now, the last step in the process of pharmacovigilance incorporates activities required to prevent the adverse effect. So, the prevention of adverse effect. Now, a number of activities are planned to minimize adverse effect of a drug. So, the first step under prevention of adverse effects is performing risk minimizing activities. And the second step is to monitor risk minimization activities. Now, risk minimizing activities include updation of patient information leaflet, then update labeling of drug by proper documentation of adverse effect, then indicate restrictions in the use of drug so that adverse effect could be avoided, then precautions and if any to be taken are also revised. Now, in few cases, if the drug produces very serious adverse effects, fatal adverse effects or life-threatening adverse effects which could not be minimized or which could not be prevented, the drug is withdrawn from the market. So this is all in brief on the concept of pharmacovigilance and summary on the process of pharmacovigilance. If you find the video useful, kindly like, subscribe and share this video. Thanks for watching this video.